Hey food fans, welcome to Cooking Like a Pro with Chef Cal and me, Mrs. Chef, his wife Christa DeMercurio. We're dishing out culinary intuition, insights, and imagination to spice up your meals and make cooking more fun. On today's episode, my chef husband and I discuss the lesser-known strategy of scaling and portioning, changing up the way we make potato salad, and exploring anti-inflammatory foods. Let's dig in. Today's episode was broadcast and recorded live on AM/FM radio.
Welcome to Cooking Like a Pro. This is Chef Cal and Mrs. Chef Christa.
Hello.
There's a lot of different things that come into cooking, and I know it's a cooking show, but we do try to talk about, things related to cooking besides just strictly food. And here, this is one of those things that it needs to be taught along with knife skills, kind of at the beginning of learning and interpreting recipes and such for yourself. And that's reading a recipe and being able to measure things, being able to scaling up and down. A lot of people don't even understand the term scaling, but it's quite important. I remember Christa, when you were doing the cooking for the school, and it was, cooking for 4 versus cooking for, 60 or 70 kids all having tacos. You better know how to scale.
That's something that I kind of want to, it's on my heart to start teaching people is, everybody's so focused on this is a recipe for 4, this is a recipe for 6. Mm-hmm. And they're stuck on that, where we just go back to, it's a recipe for 1. And then we multiply it out. So I was talking to somebody a couple of days ago that, we prep these big items and have all this stuff on hand, but each plate that goes out, we are cooking for 1 person. Mm-hmm. But overall, we are prepared to cook for 100 maybe, but we focus on that 1 person. So if you can get that down to 1, then you can multiply it out. Then you can extend it to 4, you can extend it to 8 people, then you can extend it to 20 people, things like that.
Yeah, and normally what we'll do is we'll always try even numbers, because definitely in the restaurant business, more often than not, it was an even number of 2 people as far as 2 guests at a table, or 4 guests, or 6, just because generally speaking, the majority of people coming in were couples, or they came in pairs. So the recipes for example, that we're putting together for the cookbook, or they're really going to be for 2 or for 4 or for 6, because that way you don't have to move them around too much. But scaling is that trick. And let's say you go to a website, or you go online. Again, we didn't have online back when I started, but now you can go online, find a recipe, but check to make sure that it's the recipe, when you get the list of ingredients, that it's allowing you to scale. There should be a button there that says scale. I don't know if that's something that's common, because I don't go online looking for recipes.
Well, ours says serving, so if we have our soup recipe on there, I was just looking at today, it's for 8 people, because it's a pot of soup. Yeah. But if you wanted to make it for larger gatherings, say at Thanksgiving for 16 people, then you can take up to 16 servings.
Yeah, well, and it's just, because then you're just doubling everything. But, you might be cooking for 2, you might be cooking for 50, but I think that understanding that what you're doing when you're scaling is you are adjusting the quantities of the ingredients. It's as simple as that, either increasing or decreasing. But you're doing that to every single ingredient. And to be honest, not all things scale equally. And it'd be nice if they did, but there are times where, especially in baking, that things don't scale. But generally scaling, doubling something. If it's 1 cup, then you put in 2 cups. If it's 1 ounce, you put in 2 ounces. If it's, 2 teaspoons, you put in a tablespoon and a third, or, whatever those measurements are.
For the most part, it does. If you get into commercial cooking, we move into weights. We don't use cups and teaspoons and tablespoons. It's more accurate to use weight. The other day, we were going to have pasta, and I was looking at the bottle, and it says that 2 ounces is a serving. So I took out the scale and went, okay, 2 ounces of pasta, there's going to be 4 of us eating, so I multiplied it, so that's 8 ounces. And 8 ounces of pasta was perfectly enough for all of us to eat. But it was by weight. It was not half a box. It wasn't a cup, because, especially when you work with flour, too, a cup of flour, if you tamp it down, is different than a cup of flour that's been fluffy and
sifted.
Yeah. So weight is more consistent.
Yeah. Either weight but in a lot of things, actually in most things, weight and butter are almost identical. For example, 8 ounces of butter equals a cup. And there's 8 ounces in a cup, whether liquid or in weight.
Yeah.
So those things, aren't good. But learn ounces, learn weight, also volume, for measurements or something you need to know. But you mentioned, Christa, one word that is really kind of at the heart of all this, and that's scale, as in, do you have a scale? Do you have a weight scale at home? And if you don't, you need one. I would recommend one that first off has a tare. You need a tare setting, because what a tare will do is if you set a bowl on top of the scale, and let's say the bowl weighs 13 ounces, you hit the tare, and the tare takes away the weight of the bowl.
It zeroes it out.
Yeah, so it zeroes it out. So if you're using, like-sized pans and pots and bowls, it can save you an awful lot of time by using the tare. But you really want a scale that will alternate and give you the option of either in ounces, which ounces go to pounds, 16 ounces in a pound, or grams. But yes, a scale, be sure that you have one. They're very inexpensive. Again, make sure you get one that has ounces, grams, and then also where you can tare things, because it's a tare. So it's not like tearing a piece of paper.
Yes.
It's tearing, meaning replacing that weight. So yep, get yourself a scale. Again, you want to know how to portion. Another example of this would be, our dog, Remy, gets his food, which is sweet potatoes, which are mashed. And then he also gets either rice or oats, and then chicken. And we do a mixture of this stuff. So last night we got all of his ingredients together, and my wife just portioned out equal parts of the rice and the sweet potatoes, mixed those together. And then I just took the chicken and processed it, cooked it, fine diced it, and then just bagged it up in 3-ounce portions. So in the morning, when you prep something, you allow yourself a lot of leeway, a lot of extra time. So it's 3 times as fast, 4 times as fast in the morning with everything going on to just say, boom.
Grab a bag.
Yeah, warm up his stuff, throw it in the bag, throw it in his bowl, and it's one more thing you can click off the table.
And I think that's where we do a lot of sauces. A lot of sauces we try and do a bulk batch and then portion it out so that we have it ready to go. We had our tacos all portioned out, so we made tacos really quick last night because it was all ready to go.
Yeah, our freezer is pretty well full of portioned out things. So basically what it is when you're cooking something, even if you're cooking for 2 people, and it doesn't mean you can't make enough sauce and you make an extra quart or so because it's easier to make then, and then portion it out in 2-ounce portions, put it in something you can freeze and off to the freezer. And the next time you need a demi-glace or something, you don't have to go through the whole process. You just pull a couple ounces out of the freezer and you're ready to go. So we're going to take a quick break. We appreciate you listening here at Cooking Like a Pro. Chef Cal, Mr. Chef, back in just a moment. Welcome back to Cooking Like a Pro. And so we were working together, it was a few days ago, me and my wife at home, and had some potatoes. So I went ahead and cooked off some potatoes, and we wanted to talk a little bit about bound salad. We're going to start talking about potato salad here. But it was interesting because my wife did a little bit different. I always, I cook my potatoes, I dice them up, then generally mayonnaise is like the first thing I put in, and then I season them from there. Onion, celery, the basic stuff that you put in, bacon, green onions, whatever you want to put in your potato salad. But I wanted my wife, Mrs. Chef, to explain her history on that, because I actually followed her instructions when I made this a few days ago, and it really came out nice.
This is the way I grew up with potato salad. I grew up with a baked potato salad first off. Now, you did boil the potatoes, so it was similar process after that, but traditionally it was a baked potato that we would peel. First you would bake it whole.
Yeah.
Then you would take the skin off, which you did. You actually boiled yours whole, and then we took the skin off.
Yeah. But we also, when we took the skin off, we used a different technique, and that was something that my grandma showed me, and that was the back of a butter knife. The back side of the butter knife, not the blade side that you would cut with, but the back, because you don't want to cut into the potato, but you want to scrape off.
Yeah, you hold it kind of like you would a paring knife. So you almost kind of pare it, but using the back of the butter knife. So, and actually this was kind of interesting, and he brought this up earlier today, that we went back and forth in creating this potato salad. He bought the potatoes, then I came in and peeled them, then he diced them, and then together we started coming up with a combination of oil and vinegar. And it's a 1-to-1 ratio, and we had gone down to Napa a few months ago, and we got these really nice infused olive oil and infused white balsamic vinegars.
Yeah, we used the vinegar we used was a Sicilian lemon, so it was infused with that, and it was a really nice, again, white balsamic. And then the oil was actually infused with Madagascar black peppercorns, and it was really deep. So it's kind of unique that we just kind of came up with some fairly obscure oil and vinegar ingredients to start with.
Yeah, so what you do is you take a 1-to-1 ratio of oil and vinegar, and you simply toss the potatoes in that, and then let them set for a while. Let them, and you can let them marinate overnight even. And if you do that prep beforehand, if you're going to make a salad the next day, then after it's set, then start adding your seasoning, your celery, if you're going to do any boiled egg, etc., and then add lastly the mayonnaise to kind of pull it all together.
Yeah, and you don't, and what I realized and noticed is you really didn't need that much mayonnaise. No. Not nearly, maybe a third of the mayonnaise that I would normally put in, which of course is going to make it a lot healthier. But I think, remember, potatoes are going to be very, very porous. They're going to really soak up a lot. And they really soaked up that lemon and that black peppercorn flavor. And that's why I thought it made it just a really nice potato salad. And again, also the going light on the mayonnaise.
And even the next day it was even better.
Yeah, so again, just some minced celery, 1/8 inch squared, we would call it like a brunoise, but it's kind of like a fine chop, not a mince, but a fine chop of some celery, and we have some onion, and of course always a little bit of secret salt. We've talked about that before. It's just a mixture of salt, granulated garlic, and white pepper. And it's something that we use in just about anything and everything that we make. And also with the potato salad, I typically add a little bit of celery salt too, just to kind of enhance that celery a little bit. Well, celery is just one of those. It may not be a flavor that you always recognize, but it's certainly a flavor that you almost always start with when it comes to French cooking, because the foundation of all French cooking is stock, period. That's just where it starts. French cooking starts with stocks, and a stock starts with a mirepoix, and a mirepoix is always celery, onion, and carrot. So that celery, and onion, and carrot they provide this background flavor that all stocks are going to want, whether it's seafood, poultry, lamb, beef, salmon, it doesn't matter. The only thing you might change is carrots do have, the orange pigmentation in them. So if you want a light-colored sauce, maybe like a seafood, like a fish veloute, or maybe a crab or a clam stock, then just take out the carrots and replace them with leeks, and you pretty much but you still get that same flavor. And celery is something that you don't really see. It's kind of like the uncommon or unsung hero.
Which is interesting, because I grew up with a lot of celery. My dad put celery in everything. We had it in our eggs in the morning. We had it in our potato salad. It was a very common ingredient for me cooking growing up.
And also remember, this is a side note, but when you think about the vegetable that you're going to be eating, think about how it sits in the and where we're actually, where it's coming from. But when we get heavy rains during particular parts of the season where celery or romaine lettuce, where things grow facing up, then that rain causes a lot of mud. So you want to make sure that you always, clean your celery and your romaine, just any place where that dirt might have gotten into.
Which I pulled out because lettuce was so expensive last week. I just bought a single head of romaine, brought it home, and literally every single leaf had a pile of dirt in the bottom of it. It was very covered.
No, there was enough. You could have just grown some more.
Yeah.
But anyway, so a balanced salad, again, is anything that's going to be bound together. In this case, quite often it's mayonnaise. Could be anything. It could be a little bit of oil and vinegar. I think of a lot of these really healthy salads that are made with things like lentil and different grains, wild rice. There's just so many things that are out there. You know, the other things that fall into that category, things like coleslaw, bean salads. I know I look back when we first started out in the old days, we'd have a brunch, and we seemed like we'd always say everything was bound salads. It was coleslaw. It was macaroni salad. It was potato salad. It was 3 or 4 bean salad. You know, those were the type of salads that...
Carrot salad.
Yeah, carrot
pea
salad.
salad. Yeah.
Beet salad. We used to do a salad that I used to really enjoy. It was bacon, cheddar, and peas. We put like some red onion in there, just a little bit of light mayonnaise in it. But again, just salads that are bound together. And so when you break salads apart, basically you have bound salads and you have lettuce salads. Okay, and then you can also add the addition of a fruit salad as another category. But, you know, lettuce salads, things with romaine or head lettuce, wedge salads, that kind of stuff.
Well, you don't have to default to mayonnaise thinking that process like we did. We used
oil vinegar.
You get the oil and vinegar first and try different vinegars, try different oils. The last week when I made the potato salad, I used an avocado oil, and then I used a straight white balsamic. In the past, I've used a red wine vinegar. Mm-hmm. So you can use different flavors. You can use a red wine vinegar and an olive oil. You can use avocado oil. And I forgot when I made it before, I added a touch of walnut oil, just a little bit, just to give it a little bit of dimension in that vinegar and oil base. Yeah,
they say walnuts are good. I was reading something today that says walnuts attack the parasites in our body. I don't know. Yeah, I thought so too. You know, it's weird if nothing else. But anyway, so there's a lot of different salads that are out there, and I think you can have fun with those. You know, it used to just be that head lettuce salad back in the day, but now you can get creative. You can get creative. There's all kinds of different dressings that you can do.
Curious, when you had salad growing up as a kid, all we had was iceberg lettuce. That's all we knew.
Yeah, that's pretty much us too. You know, and that's kind of all there was.
Yeah.
You know, you really didn't see a lot of the leafy greens until later on. One thing that we always had was chard too, but most of our leafy greens were always cooked. You know, they would stew them, you know, or, you know, maybe take, you know, chard and make a rhubarb pie out of something like that with rhubarb. But there were a lot of different heavy, very fibrous lettuces that we would have. But most of those were cooked, but that doesn't mean you can't throw them in a salad.
Well, that's I kind of found it interesting. Kind of about the 90s, the field greens, the mixed greens came out. It was like, don't use the iceberg anymore. Yeah. Let's use this that's got all these different textures and colors.
Yeah, but you know, the thing about that is that generally, you know, when you come up with a dish, the you know, the liquid component needs to match. And so often you see a really heavy laden, maybe in density and thickness, but also maybe just in just heavily flavored, you know, component that you're gonna make a dressing out of, and then put it on a lettuce that's really light. And you mentioned field greens. We used to call it mesclun mix back in the 90s, and that's what we used a lot when we were competing. And the thing about mesclun mix is you almost don't need hardly anything on it, because you got the rocket, and you got the frisee, and you got the chicory, and you got, you know, they're like baby lettuces, and red and green lettuce and all, and you can literally, you got this abundance of flavor that have bitters and spices and pepper notes and all kinds of cool things. But anyway.
So here's a quick trick. Just add some vinegar to a really thick dressing like a ranch or 1,000 and make it into a lighter dressing.
There you go. There's the tip. Write that one down. Cooking like a pro. Chef Cal, Chef Christa. We will be back in just a minute. Welcome back to Cooking Like a Pro. Chef Cal and Mrs. Chef here. And, you know, I wanted to talk about this. We didn't get to it last week, but I wanted to talk about inflammatory, with the inflammatory concerns that we have with our bodies. I wanted to talk about anti-inflammatory foods. So things that would help you when you have, you know, whether it's pain, sometimes redness, swelling, even heat. Sometimes it can get warm when you have these almost kind of like allergy reactions. You need to know, you know, is my diet causing any of those things? So you can start looking at anti-inflammatory foods, and one of the things that I noticed is when you put these together, you have like a list of fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds and then different oils, fats, and herbs and spices. You can literally take this and make, as we were just talking about, you know, bound salads, or maybe like a bound dish. You could take and make it out of that. Because if you take a vegetable that would be anti-inflammatory, things like, all of your berries fall into that category. And then, your tomatoes and your broccoli and tomato seasons. I'm excited about that. And even avocados and peppers. So if you take these things, for example, let's just take avocados. And then you go down and say, okay, what kind of nut or seed, which is anti-inflammatory, that I could add to that? So maybe we're going to go ahead, and we just mentioned walnuts. Let's add some walnuts to that. So we have diced avocados, walnuts. We're also going to add maybe some diced tomato in there. Then we're going to come down to our oil and fats. And just as Christa mentioned about using avocado oil, we use a lot of avocado oil now. We're going to use the avocado oil to bind that together. And then you get down to an herb and spice, so you can go those other different directions as far as your taste buds go. And you got fresh garlic, you got ginger, turmeric. These are all great things for anti-inflammatory. Again, garlic, ginger, turmeric, black pepper, cayenne pepper, almost any pepper is going to... Matter of fact, thinking of pepper, you just bought some pepper. I know we're going to talk about African foods in the next segment, but what was that? And you brought some pepper home, and I did smell it. We haven't used it yet.
It's
very unique.
It's very unique. It's
not what
pungent.
I expected.
No, and I actually took a little bit and put it on my tongue. It is extremely stingy. So I'm going to have to work with it and see how, with my lack of heat tolerance, how I can use it.
You're evolving. You are evolving. I can tell you, as your husband and as a chef, that you're evolving when it comes to your heat level, because it used to be lower than it is now.
It is, but actually I discovered there's different areas of types of heat that hit different areas of your mouth. This particular one was very forward on the tip of my tongue. Like jalapenos, I can't stand it because they go straight to the back of my throat and make me want to cough. But this one was very forward and very, it was just a different type of sting. So I'm curious to work with it, maybe do a little smoke with it. What could we come up with?
Yeah, well, and I think that's one of the keys is getting used to. If you look at the around the world at cultures where pepper is, well, first off, if you go way back in pepper, in history, pepper was actually a currency as valuable, it was used as money. So it's spread out a lot. And because it's spread out through, the different travels back in those days of, Christopher Columbus and Marco Polo and all that stuff, it was able to spread and create this variety of peppers from all over the world, where if you go to an Asian culture, you're getting into the serranos and the smaller chilies, and then you're going down south in the southern hemisphere, south of us, down in the Hispanic areas, and you're getting jalapenos and some that are fire roasted. If you roast and smoke a jalapeno, you get what's called a chipotle. So if you've ever wondered where a chipotle comes from, and then you can go into the Latin countries and you start getting the different chilies that they mix into their foods. And if you go to these countries where the chilies are one of the more dominant flavoring elements, you have less cardiovascular concerns, and you have age limits where the age expectancies are higher, and just much more healthy for you, because sweating is the way your body air conditions itself.
Regulates.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with sweating at the table. Well, I mean, not sweating too much, but anyway, so I had opened up a can, speaking of sweating, I'd opened up a can of jalapenos. They're the pickled jalapenos, not the tamed ones, but fairly strong. But they had carrots in there, and if you've ever wondered why those carrots are in there, it forms what they call an escabeche, which it's the carrots, they pick up that heat from the jalapenos, and escabeche is like a real spicy, I'd probably use the term like relish, that you'll see in a lot of Hispanic or Mexican cultures. It's just something that I think they're great, but a carrot is a porous vegetable. Even though it's a dense vegetable, it's still porous, and it's just going to soak in a lot of that heat element.
Yeah, it didn't pass my test.
Yeah, I said, here, sweetheart, try this carrot.
No.
Anyway,
it didn't go well.
It wasn't in the mouth long, let's put it that way. But anyway, so if you're having, and I guess this, comes down to the whole, adage that you are what you eat. Think about that. If your body is reacting in a certain way, the first thing you should look at is your diet.
I love to have blueberries. They are very anti-inflammatory.
Blueberries are all berries fall into that category, and they're good for you. It's nice when the season is good. Well, I noticed something that you and Isaac do at home, which is you've been taking the blueberries, and because the shelf life on blueberries is even if you treat them well, dry them off, rinse them, dry them, store them on a paper towel, make sure that they can breathe. Even if you go through all the processes of how to properly store them, you're still they are a fruit that's going to mold quickly. And you guys have been tossing them in the freezer.
Yeah, just taking the little plastic box straight off the shelf, because we try and get a few days out of using them fresh, and then just pop them in the freezer. And they just hang out there. Yeah,
but you guys do the shake thing. See, unfortunately, I'm the only real breakfast person, it seems, in the family. Although, sometimes you just need a stack of pancakes. You need some French toast. Because that's how I was raised. But
of course, that is inflammatory food.
Of course it is. But I know that you and our son are having fun with these. What are those little ninja things?
Yeah, they're little mini ninja blender.
Yeah, I got them those for Christmas, and they've been thoroughly enjoying them the last few months, and I'm real impressed with our now 16-year-old that he's kind of a little bit of a mad scientist, and we've talked about him before, like he gets back there with his ramen.
So that's what we're doing with our shakes in the morning, is what fruit are we going to put in there? Are we going to put Greek yogurt? Are we going to do one of our fresh eggs that we've poached? And, this morning because I do put some milk in mine just for a little bit of creaminess, but I've got the blueberries, I've got bananas, I've got a poached egg from our chickens right out back.
Oh, yeah.
I've got Greek yogurt, I've got my AG1 powder in there, and literally in 30 seconds I've had breakfast. How long would it take you to eat an egg and a thing of yogurt and half a banana?
But I think that with me, there's some satisfaction in digging a fork into something. I don't know. I like to have utensils in my hand. I've never been much for the smoothie person. I know it's a big thing. A lot of people out there doing it, and you guys do it, and I think it's great. And I guess if somebody made it for me, I certainly wouldn't have a problem, with it. But I like to bite into things. I mean, I'd rather have my eggs in an omelet. Those chickens are working so hard out there, and we get a dozen eggs every 2 days. We get about 6 or 7 eggs a day, and they're just beautiful. They're just beautiful little eggs, and I had some corned beef and cabbage the other day. Not corned beef. It was after the corned beef and cabbage. I just had corned beef and hash. As we had some diced potatoes left over, and the corned beef, diced it up, and had these our littlest chicken. What is he? I call him Fluffy.
Fluffernutter. She's a silky.
A silky, yeah. So she makes these little small eggs. She's a small chicken. She's like half or a third the size of the other ones, but she's so cute. She's got this little hair thing going. I don't know what you call that, but it looks like
top knot.
Yeah, it looks like a crew cut, not a crew cut, but a
kind of like Rod Stewart.
Yeah. We ought to call him Rod. But anyway, it's a cute chicken, and we get his little or her little eggs, and I think I lightly poached like 4 of those and put them on top, and they were delicious. Remember, when you're poaching your eggs, a little bit of vinegar in there, hold the egg together. You don't want it boiling, you want it simmering in exactly 3 minutes. But anyway, we're going to be back in just a moment. We're going to take our last quick break here. We're going to be coming back at Cooking Like a Pro with some talk about some food from the continent of Africa. So hang around for that, and we'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to Cooking Like a Pro, Chef, Mr. Chef and Mrs. Chef, and I wanted to talk a little bit about African food, and I've done a lot of African food. I've done a lot of every kind of food. I mean, we used to do 4 special events a month. This is just my first restaurant, okay? This is before I ventured off into all the rest of them, but 4 events, and one would be a winemaker dinner, one might be a special event, maybe there's a holiday that month. One would be a Chef Cal chef show, and so we'd always have, maybe one was like all crab, maybe 5-6 courses of all crab, probably like $35. Yeah, times have changed, but we did that every month. We'd have 4 events, and we did that for 18 years. So that's a lot of events. I mean, we're talking A ton, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different ones. So we were
So
always
you had to have explored a lot of different continents and countries
and cultures, and we were always looking. I was always looking for. I would be asking people. I remember I had a radio show back then as well. And I was like, okay, what do you people want to see? Okay, I'll do whatever you want, because we can always figure it out. And anyway, I know we did 2 dinners with all food for Kenya. We also did it for the Congo. We did for the Congo. I did a lot of stuff that was up in the northern area, like Morocco and Ethiopia. Foods from that area, where you're kind of coming up with grains and things, but mostly rice. Rice is a big one, but you see a lot of yams and plantains, a lot of the things that they make, and potatoes and pumpkins still also, but things that are a little easier to grow. And a lot of times they just kind of do a one-pot thing, and one pot they call a Jollof, but it's basically a rice dish, and I think we would call it a stew. Kind of like they cook in something that's called a tangy. And it comes up to like a smokestack. And what that allows to happen is for all the steam and condensation that would normally come up, and if you smell your stew cooking, then there's aroma / flavor that's flowing out, and a tangine just kind of locks it in. It's kind of an interesting cooking tool.
The first time I'd ever seen one was at Williams-Sonoma years ago. I thought, what is that? That is such an interesting contraption.
And that's, those are the fun things to get too. I know that we have a friend coming over, a dear friend coming over tomorrow, and the last time she lives at the coast, and the last time we were over there, we made a great big paella. And I was excited because I seen our paella pan the other day, and it just got me thinking, when she comes over, we need to do another paella. Just something fun. Basically a big rice dish, but it's got shrimp and fish and chicken and usually shellfish, if not clams, mussels, or maybe both. But just that comes down to like the tangine or the jollof. It's just a one-pot cooking. It's like we would make stew, and we would serve stew. And that's all you would get, because stew had your vegetables, it had your meat. Well, you'd probably have some dipping bread to go with it, but everything was in there. Your starch was in there with your potatoes, your meat, there was the gravy, and then your carrots, your onions, your celery, your corn, peas. Peas are always a good one to throw in there. But it's just something. It's one other culture that's out there, and I think that's always a fun thing to do. Remember, we have to eat. Why not make it fun? But anyway, a lot of opportunities that are out there. I think when you bring in a culture, and a culture doesn't mean you need to leave the United States. You can have Boston-style clam chowder in California, or Manhattan-style red clam chowder from the East Coast. You can go down to the South and have Cajun food, which is very much French-influenced, because that's kind of where the French, settled from the cuisine-wise. But again, just think about different places and different things you can do, and ways to be able to make food something more than just filling your stomach.
It's just exploring sauces and seasonings. You could take one piece of chicken, cook it the same way every single night, and do a different sauce and seasoning every night, and travel the entire world all year.
Thank you so much for spending time with us. Until next time, we hope you'll be cooking up a storm in the kitchen. So we'll be with you again next week with food, flavor, and fun, right here on Cooking Like a Pro podcast.